The rest of that day passed in a tense calm. James finally told Samuel the truth in the afternoon, unable to bear the boy not knowing any longer. He found Samuel alone on the swing set behind the house, humming to himself. James sat on the next swing, gently swaying. "Samuel," he began, voice gentle, "remember I promised to tell you about your father today?" Samuel nodded, turning to listen intently. The late sun cast a glow on his inquisitive face. James's heart pounded. He reached out to hold the small hand. "Your mother, Aisha, she was very special to me. I didn't know until recently that I am your father." The boy's eyes widened. He looked at James, then down at their joined hands, then back. You're my dad?" he whispered, as if fearing it wasn't true. James's eyes filled even as he smiled. "Yes, I am. I'm so sorry I wasn't here for you earlier. I never knew about you until now. But I promise, you won't be alone anymore." Samuel's face went through a storm of emotions: surprise, joy, even a fleeting anger or confusion. "Why didn't you come? Mama was sick. I wished for a dad," he said in a small, hurt voice. Tears spilled down James's cheeks. He knelt in the dirt before Samuel. "I wish I had been there, son. I didn't know. Your Uncle John did something very wrong and didn't tell me about you. I came as soon as I found out. I'm here now." He opened his arms hesitantly. If you want, I'd really like to be your dad." For a heartbeat, Samuel stayed still. Then, with a choked cry, he threw himself into James's arms. James held his son tightly for the first time, both of them crying softly, one mourning the lost years, the other overwhelmed that his secret wish had come true. From the house, Margaret watched through the window, wiping tears of her own as she witnessed the joyous moment. By nightfall, the household prepared for bed amid heightened security. 2 police officers patrolled just outside the compound walls, and Inspector Neddy sat in an unmarked car down the street, watching for any suspicious activity. Inside, they kept lights low. The children of the shelter were all asleep in their dormitory-style room. Samuel, now having fully bonded with James, insisted on sleeping next to him on a mat in Margaret's living room. James stroked the boy's hair until he drifted off, marveling at how fate had given him this chance at fatherhood. Near midnight, James found himself still awake, lying beside his son and listening to the sounds of the Lagos night. A distant dog barked. Generators rumbled. Frogs croaked from a puddle nearby. He thought he also heard, faintly, raised voices down the street, perhaps neighbors or the police chatting. He was almost dozing off when a sudden pop, pop, pop shattered the silence. Gunshots. In an instant, James was alert. The front of the house erupted in noise, shouting, and a crash as the door was kicked open. The women screamed. Samuel jolted awake with a cry of fear. James sprang up, adrenaline surging. By the weak emergency lantern's light, he saw 2 armed men in the doorway, having easily overpowered the single officer who was inside. One was the scar-faced Rasak, the devil himself, and behind him another hulking figure wielding a pistol. "There's our American doctor," Rasak sneered, training a handgun on James. "Did you really think you could betray us and walk free?" Margaret shielded 2 smaller orphans who had woken, herding them back toward the hallway where Grace and Helen were huddling. Peter was nowhere in sight, likely outside or trying to alert the other officer. James positioned himself between Rasak and the direction of the others, heart thundering. "Rasak," James said, trying to sound calm. "The police are right outside. You won't get away with this." Even as he spoke, he noticed the officer who had been at the door lying motionless on the floor. Whether dead or unconscious, he couldn't tell. Rasak's scar twisted as he smirked. "The police? You mean the 2 I led on a merry chase a block away with a decoy? They'll be busy for a while, long enough for us to have a chat." He stepped forward. The other thug closed the door behind them, keeping his gun aimed loosely at the family. Samuel whimpered and clutched James's leg. James gently moved the boy behind him. His mind raced. They needed to stall until backup arrived. He prayed Inspector Nettie would realize something was wrong when her men didn't check in. "What do you want?" James asked, hands subtly raised. "Money? I have some in my account. I can get you." "Shut up!" Rasak barked. "This isn't about money anymore. It's about payback. You and your brother thought you could make fools of me. Now his testimony might put me in prison? No. We'll see who ends up dead or behind bars." He motioned with his gun at Margaret and the others. "All of you, line up over there." His accomplice strode over and started yanking people to their feet. Helen cried out as she was dragged forward. Grace helped Margaret stand. The older woman glared defiantly at Rasak despite the tremor in her hands. The orphanage caretaker, a middle-aged woman, stepped in front of a few children who peeked out from the hallway, trying to shoo them back to safety. James's mind was on fire. If they lined everyone up, Rasak might execute them one by one, or take hostages. He had to do something. He caught Peter's figure quietly re-entering through the kitchen door, behind the intruders. He must have slipped out when the commotion started. Peter held a thick wooden pestle, from the mortar and pestle used to pound yam, and was creeping up behind the second gunman. James decided to keep Rasak talking, focusing attention on himself. "Rasak, you say I betrayed you, but I was never part of your scheme," he said loudly, drawing the gangster's eyes. "My brother lied to us both. If anything, we have a common enemy in him." Rasak laughed harshly. "Nice try. Your saintly twin is already as good as dead to me. I'll deal with him in due time. Prison accidents happen all the time here." He waved the gun, forcing James to move closer to the group as well. "But first, I'm going to take away what he took from me. He cost me a lucrative operation, millions in pipeline money, so I think it's only fair I take something from you. Maybe your beloved mother, or that little boy hiding behind you." James's blood ran cold. He subtly edged in front of Samuel fully. "Don't you touch him," he growled before he could stop himself. His reaction made Rasak's eyes light up with cruel interest. "Ah, the boy. He means something to you, huh? I heard a rumor. Something about a hidden son," Rasak sneered. "Delicious. Perhaps I'll start with him." He pointed the gun toward the child. Everything happened in a split second. James, with a surge of primal fear and fury, lunged at Rasak's outstretched arm just as a deafening gunshot went off. The sound was enormous in the small space. James felt a searing pain stripe across his left arm, but adrenaline let him ignore it. He grappled with Rasak, attempting to wrench the gun away. Rasak was strong, fueled by rage and desperation. They crashed into a side table, splintering it. At the same instant, Peter swung the wooden pestle hard at the back of the second thug's head. There was a sickening thud, and the man crumpled to the floor, his pistol skittering away. "Everybody down," Peter shouted. Grace and Helen pulled Margaret and the caretaker to the ground, shielding the children. James and Rasak struggled fiercely. The gun went off again, shattering a window. A neighbor's dog barked wildly, and shouts could be heard outside. The neighborhood was waking to the violence. Rasak struck James's face with the gun barrel, dazing him and splitting his eyebrow. James tasted blood but refused to let go. He twisted Rasak's wrist with all his might. Rasak howled, and the gun finally dropped from his hand. Peter rushed over, kicking it out of Rasak's reach. Rasak tackled James in response, both crashing to the ground. The scarred man's hands closed around James's throat, choking him in a frenzy. James's vision blurred as he struggled. Then suddenly Rasak released a strangled grunt and his grip slackened. He keeled over to the side, revealing Margaret standing behind him, holding a heavy cast-iron frying pan. She had brought it down on Rasak's back with all her strength. "No one harms my family," she cried, eyes blazing. Rasak rolled, trying to recover, but James, gasping for air, managed to pin him down now. Outside, sirens wailed, a police patrol finally responding. The front door burst open with Inspector Nettie and 2 officers, guns drawn. "Freeze! Police!" she shouted. It was over in moments. Nettie cuffed a groaning Rasak, while another officer secured the unconscious thug. Rasak, realizing his predicament, let out a stream of curses. "You think a prison can hold me? I own half the cops in this city," he spat, struggling until an officer forced him quiet. Inspector Nettie looked at the scene and shook her head. "You folks are all right?" she asked. James nodded, finally sitting back, chest heaving. He became aware of the stinging pain in his arm and the warm blood trickling from the graze. The inspector noticed. "You're hurt." "I'll live," James panted. He glanced over to see Samuel clinging to Grace, sobbing in terror but apparently uninjured. In 2 strides, James was at his son's side, pulling him into his embrace. I'm here," he whispered, soothing the crying child. Helen and Margaret came around them, forming a tight family hug. They were all shaking, but alive. In that huddle, James met his mother's eyes. "Mama, you saved my life," he said softly. Margaret managed a tearful smile. "I couldn't lose you again, James." The police swarmed the scene, leading Rasak and his cohort out to the waiting vans. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered at a distance, murmuring anxiously. Mrs. Adebayo, the nosy neighbor who had first warned James about John, was among them, clutching her wrapper and shaking her head at the spectacle. James caught her eye and gave a nod of thanks. She heaved a sigh of relief seeing him standing. Inspector Nettie took James's statement once things calmed. Paramedics arrived to tend to his arm wound. It was a graze across the bicep, luckily not deep. As they bandaged him, Nettie said, "You were incredibly brave, Dr. Carter, or incredibly foolish. Either way, we have Rasak now, thanks in no small part to you and your family." "It was a group effort," James replied, managing a wry smile. He looked over to where Peter was giving his own statement. "We protect each other." Nettie nodded approvingly. "John will be pleased to hear this. Rasak might try to bribe his way out, but with the evidence and now an attempted murder on police and civilians, he's done. We'll ensure he faces justice." James felt a profound wave of relief. The nightmare that had chased him across the ocean was finally over. The syndicate's head was caught, and while there might be remnants, their main threat was neutralized. For the first time in nearly a year, James felt safe. The next morning's sunrise found the Carter family exhausted, but hopeful. After a few hours at the police station finishing paperwork and ensuring the shelter's children were calmed and cared for, they all returned home. The compound, though battered from the fight, bullet holes in the wall and a broken door, still stood sturdy in the golden light of day. It felt symbolic. Their family had been through a war, but they remained standing together. News of the dramatic showdown spread through the neighborhood. By afternoon, well-wishers and curious neighbors stopped by. Mrs. Adebayo brought over a pot of pepper soup, insisting it would help them regain their strength. The old gossip also beamed at James and said loud enough for Margaret to hear, "I always knew this one was a good son. You're real gold, Margie. Glad you finally see it." Margaret could only smile sheepishly and pat James's shoulder. James finally had a quiet moment to call his colleagues back in New York, informing them he'd be extending his leave to sort out family emergencies. Dr. Sanchez was overjoyed to hear he was safe, and even more stunned to learn he had a son. "Bring him by the hospital when you return. We need to spoil him," she joked. In Lagos, life gradually normalized. Over the next week, James and his family repaired the damage to the home. With the charity's blessing, they decided to keep the property functioning as Hope Children's Shelter. That mission had become important to Margaret and the sisters. In fact, James suggested that once things settled, he would fund the expansion of the shelter as a way to honor Aisha's memory and help more kids like Samuel who needed support. It was also a way to channel the painful lessons of the past into something positive. The family agreed wholeheartedly. John's legal process moved swiftly. With Rasak and other syndicate members in custody, John was considered a key witness. In exchange for his full testimony, the court showed leniency. He was convicted of fraud and money laundering but given a relatively light sentence of 2 years, with the possibility of parole in 1. When James visited him after the hearing, John broke down in gratitude and vowed to spend his time in prison bettering himself. He had already started teaching literacy classes to other inmates as a form of penance. James saw a spark of the brother he once admired, and they began the slow journey of reconciliation through prison visits and letters. One balmy evening, James found himself sitting in the compound's front yard, watching Samuel teach Margaret how to kick a football correctly. The boy giggled as his grandmother feigned an exaggerated miss and stumbled playfully. Grace was hanging laundry nearby, and Helen was helping some of the orphans with homework on the porch. Peter manned a small grill, roasting corn for everyone. It was a scene of domestic peace James never thought he would see again. Samuel ran over to James, tugging his hand. "Daddy, come play. Grandma needs a teammate. She's losing." James laughed, a full, joyous sound that felt foreign in his mouth after so much sorrow. Daddy. How sweet that word now. He joined the impromptu game, and soon the yard was filled with shouts and laughter. They played until the sun dipped low, painting the sky in purples and oranges. As twilight fell, the family gathered around a table outside to eat roasted corn and suya skewers Peter had brought from a nearby stand. The conversation turned reflective. "I can't believe how much has changed in a year," Helen said quietly. "We almost lost everything that mattered." "But we've been given a second chance," Grace added, reaching for James's hand on the table. "We won't waste it. Thank you, James, for coming back. You reunited us." James shook his head, squeezing her hand. "We all made this possible, by facing the truth, by standing up to fear, and by forgiving. None of it was easy, but look where we are." He looked around the table at each of them, his mother, his sisters, cousin Peter, little Samuel, even the caretaker and a couple of older orphan kids who had become like part of the family. His heart brimmed with gratitude. Margaret cleared her throat, pulling out a piece of paper. I wrote something." She unfolded it nervously. "I wanted to formally apologize to you, James, and also record what we learned so we never forget." She began to read, voice wavering. "To my son, James, I am sorry for failing you. I let pride and greed cloud my love as a mother. You gave us everything, and when you needed unconditional love, I made it conditional. That was wrong. You taught us a hard lesson, that family should stand by each other not for what we can gain, but out of love. I promise henceforth to be the mother you deserve and the grandmother Samuel deserves. The Carters will rise again from this stronger and kinder." By the time she finished, everyone was in tears. James got up and hugged her tight. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. There was nothing more to add. Those simple words carried all the weight. In the days that followed, James prepared to split his life between Nigeria and the U.S. He arranged a sabbatical from the hospital, deciding to spend the next 6 months in Lagos to bond with Samuel and help stabilize things. After that, he would return to New York for work and begin the process of bringing Samuel, and perhaps Margaret, over for visits or schooling. They had options to consider, but the future looked bright. One afternoon, James took Samuel to visit Aisha's grave, a small headstone under a frangipani tree, to pay respects and introduce himself spiritually to the woman who had given him this gift of a son. As they stood there, Samuel slipped his hand into James's. "Mama used to say you were a hero doctor in America," he said softly. "I think you're a hero here too." James knelt by the grave, placing flowers. "I'm no hero, Samuel. I just tried to do what was right, and sometimes I made mistakes, but I had help. From good people." Samuel considered this and nodded. "Maybe that's what a hero is. Someone who does the right thing even if it's hard and has good people to help." James smiled and hugged him. "That sounds about right to me." Standing up, James felt a gentle breeze. He looked at his son, bright, hopeful, and at the sky beyond, where the sun shone through the leaves. A new chapter, he thought. The test he started had led through darkness, but now in its wake was a family reforged in truth and love. As they walked back to the car where Grace waited, Samuel skipped ahead, laughing as he chased a butterfly. James lingered a moment, taking in the scene, his family safe and together. In a city of millions, under the vast African sky, he had found what he came looking for, not a test of love, but the true strength of it. And this time, love had won. True love is proven not by words or gifts, but by loyalty during hard times. Dr. James Carter's journey teaches us that wealth can expose fake love, but hardship reveals the truth. When people show you who they are when you have nothing, believe them. And even after betrayal, healing is possible, through truth, courage, and forgiveness. In family, love must be earned, not bought. Thank you for watching this story on Afro Tales TV. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and share with friends and family. We have more beautiful stories coming your way, so subscribe and stay tuned. See you in the next one.